Rebirth, Enora Online 8. Written by Arlo Adams. Narrated by Brian Mesler. 1. Change came to Enora a week after Nokuro Takamoto returned me to the world. I spent 3 days in a virtual representation of my apartment while they rooted out any straggling code contributing to the AI's sentience. Although the CEO of Infinity Designs promised more of the same where the realism and mechanics were concerned, I couldn't help but wonder what would come of the virtual realm I called home. But any concerns I harbored proved short-lived. The shit went down on Priya's birthday. Minutes after Amelia accompanied me through the instance threshold, Enora reminded me how little it cared about my concerns, even less my plans. From the shadowy thicket high up the grassy tundra in the eastern hinterlands of Surin, a brute ram, its head hung low, sauntered into view. Its massive nostrils drew deep whiffs in search of edible vegetation among the high grass, and its low grumbles carried to my ears on the breeze. If 400-pound pit bulls existed in Enora Online, their growls would have sounded like that. It reminded me of an idling Harley. I peeked from behind the lone bush in the knee-high sea of weeds, then nodded toward my elven companion. "What do you think? Can I hit it from here?" The elven woman with blonde braids wound so tight they might have snapped smirked in a display of derision that caused one corner of her nose to twitch. Her eyes ticked up and to the right.
"From 57 yards? Well, your accuracy has improved beyond my expectations. Only a master marksman, or a very lucky Chanois, could do more than irritate it in these conditions."
She raised a finger as if to test the wind, but the display was for my benefit.
"Besides, you're only level 24.
She shook her head to emphasize the point.
"No. Like it or not, you're going to have to creep low in the grass and close the distance."
Solara wept, Amelia. I was making a joke. I shrugged the bow off my shoulder, then whipped an arrow from the quiver tied to my left hip. Her features flattened as much as rounded cheekbones allowed. I wasn't sure whether the hint of pink derived from the wind or embarrassment, but I assumed the former. She jabbed me with 2 fingers.
"What are you grinning at?"
In the months she'd been with me, Amelia rarely walked, stood, or crouched beside me. She lingered in the shadows at the foundation as if practicing the assassin arts she'd been taught by the elves in New Nin. She'd foregone a commission in Commander Tryon Reynard's ranks to serve as my bodyguard. I couldn't remember a time she'd actually set a hand on me and wondered if the little shove signified a new level of comfort. But I wasn't about to ask. I turned my gaze back to the target of our hunt. Priya loves brute ram steak. She's going to be thrilled.
"Gah, a grand assumption if ever I've heard one. Unless you plan on letting me draw my bow. You could have just brought your swords and made short work of it as a level 40.
What? And degrade any XP I'll get from the kill? I shook my head. I'd rather take it down as a level 24 and reap the benefits.
I thought this was about Priya's birthday.
That doesn't mean I shouldn't try to level up.
Your thirst for XP is insatiable. Is it all you think about?
I'm here so we can surprise Priya. You can infer the answer.
And what if she checks her map and spies you creeping around out here?
Destiny took her to the woodshop to enchant my katanas.
At least she'll be distracted.
As much as I would have loved to misinterpret the snipe, the elf's expression revealed concern. In the week since we took out Kame, Priya's mood changed with the wind. While I suspected the continuing flow of memories from her earlier life caused her sloping disposition, talking about them wasn't an option. Now that I knew she was over 120 years old, I couldn't imagine how intense it would be to have all the time come flooding back, or how long it might go on. Sometimes I wished I could just erase everything she recalled prior to the rescue in the Dark Wood, when I'd snatched her from Kroll, one of Kame's low-level lieutenants. But that wasn't her lot in life, and I'd be moody too. So when my betrothed didn't volunteer information, I didn't ask. She knew where I was if she ever wanted to talk. To this point, she hadn't. Amelia straightened her knees to peer over the bush, dropped back into her crouch, then sighed.
"I'll have you know, it took 4 level 26 hunters to bring down one of these on the day of the event."
The event. The hiccup in time every conscious Enoran experienced the day Infinity Designs froze the world to remove the segments of code rendering the AI sentient. The day I went from watching Priya holding Jarin beneath his first snow to waking in a perfect replica of the apartment I'd rented in the real world. Giles's description of it as a time freeze that lasted for the blink of an eye was the closest guess, but I knew better. While I longed to tell them the world stopped for a period of days in the outside world, what would have constituted a week inside, they wouldn't understand. Hell, I wasn't sure I did. Freezing a virtual realm so gargantuan, then cycling it back up with the push of a button blew my mind. But if I was lost, Enora's natives could only guess, and some came up with real doozies. The reason they thought I was a special being in the first place was because beta testers' antics became the legends of the Shenhua. And by their calendar, that was 2,000 years ago. Since Foundation thrived with elves, Michonne, humans, and a couple half-goblins who actually liked me, I zipped my lips and let them chatter. If I'd learned anything since entering the world, it was that sometimes legend is best left to the natives. Let the conjecture flow. Amelia shoved me again.
You've drifted off.
I went nowhere. Her eyebrows dipped to form straight lines like a Morse code cheat sheet.
As you say,
I will send you home if you utter the second syllable. I thrust a finger back toward the distant ethereal gateway. The way all these Michonne dote on my boy, I never enjoy a moment with him anymore. Deprive me of bath time and you'll be regaling your queen with stories about how your loose lips got you evicted from Fowler Foundation. A smile overtook her attempt to scowl.
Touchy much?
Her vernacular really was coming along. She set a hand on my shoulder.
I see it too.
See what?
Don't be evasive. You're safe with me.
When I realized she referenced my better half, I raised my chin in mock superiority. I have no idea what you mean. She chuckled, then dropped her hand.
Right. Just so you know, Priya undoubtedly respects the space you give her. Give it time.
Thanks. It's not like she's being inattentive or unkind, just... Amelia nodded understanding.
Distant.
A low grumble drew our focus back to the plains when the brute ram turned toward the thicket. Amelia cocked her chin.
You better get a shot off before it returns to cover. Otherwise you'll end up battling it in the trees. And seeing as you've chosen to leave your katana back home...
Although I'd hoped to earn Priya's appreciation when she learned of my efforts to bring down this beast at a lower level, that was only half the reason I didn't want to rely on my shogun skills. Giles rode me like a pack mule about how fortunate I was to have an endless list of classes to level, that I would take for granted the opportunities switching classes provided, the ability to mold to given situations on the fly with only a 30-second global skills cooldown, often had him labeling me an ingrate. So after Came fell and things quieted, I traveled the ridges inside the instance to level my hunter and ranger classes. I enjoyed wielding a bow, and if nothing else, it was a break from normal. Damned if I'd go into real combat without my swords, though. Shogun rocked. And although I might only be level 24 equipped that way, the instance demarcation line was only half a mile to our southeast, and if I needed to mount up and ride to keep the massive beast from trampling me, so be it. I launched from the bushes, then charged uphill. Amelia moved with such silence I couldn't be sure if she followed, but I didn't want her involved anyway. Since it had been out of range before, I winked my eyes in succession as I closed.
Brute Ram, level 22 beast, elite. These giant mammals boast a charge ability known to stun higher-level opponents for up to 7 seconds. Strength, 39. Dexterity, 12. Intelligence, 1. Wisdom, 1. Constitution, 69. Charisma, 1.
An elite. That I hadn't counted on. While it was comforting to know Amelia would be there to hobble one of its legs if things went sideways, I still wouldn't get any XP if she did. I'd need to use my hardest-hitting ranged ability if I was going to take it by surprise. Who knew? Its lower level might give me a decent chance at a stun. As I knocked the arrow and the glow of energy began to fill my arm, an information pane popped up in the bottom right of my interface.
Drilling arrow, plus 200% ranged weapon damage. Cost, 25 mana. Cast time, 3 seconds. Cooldown, 30 seconds.
Although the ability didn't actually list a stun likelihood, I'd seen it proc enough times to know the sheer impact caused the effect. I'd be stunned if an arrow drilled into my chest, too. I thought its giant hooves might drag tracks in the grass-topped soil when the brute ram skidded to a stop. Its head came around slow, but not toward me. My cast halted halfway through and the yellow glow dissipated when I followed the beast's gaze. 2 white lines of light split the air just to the left of the thicket. What the f? The line bloomed into a shimmering sphere, then spread into an oblong shape. I dropped my bow-wielding hand to one side. That's not right. No one could possibly be bound to an open field. They'd have to be using a transport pedestal or a gate like Samancia's to open a scene formed on the other side of the portal, but it proved too distant to make out any details. Then 4 giant men lurched through, wielding 2-handed axes with curved blades. Although their hulking upper bodies were bare, fine black leather covered their lower bodies. A robed figure with a hood shading half its face slipped out behind the first 4. When the men spied us, they charged in our direction. Meanwhile, the robed one scurried to one side of the portal, then raised its arms. Orange tracers bloomed behind the arcs of its hands before another ethereal gateway split the air. Men dressed in forest green from head to toe rushed through. Bows and quivers bounced on their backs. Who in the hell are these people?
Gemini, retreat!
Although Amelia's words rang out with authority, the sight of the umber-skinned barbarians with the massive axes might as well have stunned me like a drilling arrow. I squinted against the sunlight. Red stripes formed crescents on the fronts of their shoulders. A stack of them on the largest of the group reached his left pecs. Ranks? A hand clutched my bicep.
Gem, now!
The rest of the intruders fell in behind the first group. That was all the motivation I needed. I wheeled and hauled ass. Amelia twisted to look over one shoulder as we hustled downhill.
The Rangers haven't drawn their weapons.
Yeah? What do you think that means? She formed her words with a steadiness that gave no indication she ran.
Maybe they want you alive.
An arrow zipped by one of my ears, then planted into the soil ahead. Its silvery fletchings reflected the midday sun.
Never mind, Shenhua. It seems they're willing to hurt you.
You think? We sped to the edge of the ethereal border, then burst into the instance. 2. Thanks to my daily pre-dawn runs with the Cine, my stamina meter leveled out around 75%. We hustled up the narrow pass leading toward the open valley when a message popped up in my HUD.
Clan chat. Fowler Foundation. Roshan. Gemini. The Academy is under attack. Gemini.
What? By whom?
Roshan. They wear the same signets as the soldiers in Trowsby. Gemini.
Do you think the High Chancellor is finally taking a little revenge for his son's death? A couple months before, near the end of my vacation with Priya and Jaren, and Amelia, of course, soaking up rays at the coast, the son of Trowsby's High Chancellor was found burned to death in his dorm room at the repurposed Warrington Academy, the acolyte of a mysterious necromancer named Wyzen the Cruel, who terrorized a young woman who'd turned up near my foundation named Contessa of Milbury, proved responsible. Even though the faculty explained the culprit's complicity, the High Chancellor didn't take the news well. He'd invaded the academy with every intention of taking Contessa, who they'd originally charged with the crime, back to Trowsby for a sham trial. But by the time he'd come with a raiding party to arrest her, we'd returned to the Foundation where Priya repelled them. We'd sent Contessa to the academy because she wielded some strange connection to lava lines deep in the ground, something legend called the Source. I still hadn't worked out how it operated, but the powers she'd wielded at level 8 proved quite dangerous, even to Contessa herself. Last I'd heard, she'd left the academy. Her discovery in the former Warsager's library, hidden behind panels in his office beneath Warrington, led to a newfound skill to scry for magic users. And before the protege causing turmoil at the academy fell under Wyzen the Cruel's tutelage, he'd been the last minion of the Warsager. Something Nakuro hadn't exactly been straight with me about when we met the day of the event. I still don't know why. Now Contessa searched the continent with her uncle using the newfound power to bolster the Academy's student count and save magic users from the ages-old royal edict that they be registered, controlled, and sent to the rich as slaves, and used to feed under Lord Kame's appetites.
Clan chat. Fowler Foundation. Roshan. Whatever his purpose, it is of great consequence. Men with long swords flood the campus. Giles.
I have just spoken with the Queen. She's sending reinforcements. Get the students to shelter, Roshan. Help is on the way.
Roshan. The bells have been rung. They're inside.
By the time I exited the pass and sped by the barracks, the answer to my earlier query was obvious. Soldiers whose uniforms I didn't recognize and shirtless warriors with dark skin. An invasion of Warrington's Academy for young magicians. It was all spelled out in the letter I'd received from the king just weeks earlier insisting I answer for my crimes, namely dispatching his regent from Milbury Peaks into Hokram's underworld. The king was moving on us. Although we anticipated conflict, we'd hoped it'd be more on our terms than the young despot's. After all, he had never before sent a procession into the east. He was only around 17, but even his father before him left Governor Zane to manage things this far from the capital. But with Kame out of the picture, Queen Semansia and I suspected we'd removed the chief obstacle that kept the monarchy at bay, and we'd met several times to construct a plan for when this day came.
Raid alert. Marcella Grine has activated a raid on the Fowler Foundation. Your instance will be unlocked in 30 seconds. Rally your troops and prepare to defend your stronghold.
My heart thumped with purpose in my chest when I spied a chain of humans speeding up the natural steps to the grassy plateau. A beating in my ears matched its time signature. They'd come from New Nin to start new lives in service to the goddess, to support me after we'd destroyed Kame. Although we'd seen our share of invasions in the lead-up to that ultimate conflict, this was the first time they'd experienced anything like it. Even the battle between the governor's troops and the elves outside Semansia's forest had been far removed from the city in the woods. I drew a deeper breath when I reached the end of the pass, then turned left and almost bumped into Amelia, who matched me stride for stride the whole way. She read my mind in that spooky way she did.
They chose to be here, Gemini.
Still, I wondered if they wouldn't end up curses on my conscience when the day was done. But I'd just have to fight to avoid that outcome. And maybe bipolar was a thing in Enora because my other half enjoyed the burning fire in my belly to do some killing. A new pain popped into my HUD.
Foundation raid victory requirements. The following criteria must be met to overthrow a player's foundation. 1. All laborers must be killed or disabled. 2. All bound NPC companions must be KO'd. 3. The player must be KO'd. 4. Unbound NPCs must be killed or captured. 5. If the player has hired a foreman, it must be taken alive. NPCs and players who are KO'd will not spawn at the instance bind point for 2 minutes. In the event NPCs obtain victory over a player's foundation, the instance will be dissolved and the foundation stone will be returned to the player's inventory.
Like I needed the reminder. We'd used the criteria to plan our defenses after the Deathlock Kermashian Pyre burned our buildings and almost brought the foundation down. It seemed like ages ago, but had only been a little over a month. The door to the woodshop flung open when we approached. Then Probert Mulk stepped into the daylight. He was tall, and he'd added some meat to his bones despite the sweaty conditions inside the smithy as he'd ranked up his blacksmithing skill line. I glanced past him. "Why aren't you in the smithy? Where's Priya?" "Went back to the cave with Jarin about 10 minutes ago." I grasped one of his shoulders. "There's a force outside ready to attack. Get to cover." I released him, then turned toward the steps leading up to the plateau, but Probert grasped my arm. "I'd as soon gear up and fight. I've made myself some fine armor." I wheeled, then threw my hands up. I didn't have time to argue. "And I'd as soon you avoid resurrection sickness in case I need your hands for rebuilding. You're my blacksmith. If you want to suit up, do it. But get the laborers to the back of the tunnel and hide them in the hatches around the pool. Guard them. If they fall, they're gone forever." "Yes, sir." He saluted, then hustled away. A thought occurred, and I called after him. "Where are my swords?" "We completed the enchantments, and I put them in the smithy for sharpening. Want me to grab them?" "I'll do it. Get to cover." I turned again, then bumped right into a low figure with a thick beard knotted at his chest. Despite his short stature, it was like banging into a wall, and I had to take a step back to steady myself.
"Pulo." "Aye, Master Gemini. The laborers are running to the cave. Mistress Destiny is on her way. Have you reached out to Priya?"
I shook my head. "Not yet, but I will."
"Very well, then."
Another figure emerged from the woodshop, an axe clutched tight in meaty green hands.
"Morgy fight."
Pulo turned.
"We've been over this, you lug. Defenders fight. You take shelter."
He thrust a thick finger, true to his name, in the direction of the steps.
"To the cave with ye. Help Probert."
Moggy dipped his chin and lowered the woodcutting implement.
"Yes, Pulo."
He sped off. My head swiveled in derision as I watched the burly orc go. It's like everyone in this world is itching for a fight. Pulo chuckled as if it was just another day in heaven.
"Nay, MG. Just the ones who have something to fight for."
The tall, lean form of my main tank appeared at the top of the steps, then saluted to shade her face from the sun as she gazed into the narrow pass leading west. I'm down here. Her head came around, then she hustled toward us, taking 2 stony steps at a time. I met her halfway. Dicini, they've got real numbers. I grasped Pulo's arm. You know the plan. See our foreman to his hiding place and don't let him out of your sight.
Are you certain, Master? I could gather with the defenders and—
We've been over this. Protect Pulo at all costs. If he falls, the Foundation falls with him. Look around. Do you want to lose everything we've built?
Alert! The invaders have reached their force cap. Your instance will unlock in 5, 4.
I'd seen more than 30 out there, but the Foundation raising system was designed so they selected 30. If one fell, they could replace the loss with another. I swept the window away. Dicini, go! The pair hauled their butts up the steps. I followed. Amelia sped past me, turned at the top, then readied her bow.
I assume you have no qualms with my picking them off from here?
Perforate as many as you can.
Such a way with words, Gemini,
she shouted from behind once I'd passed. Probert stood at the mouth of the cave, waving a cue of Michonne inside. I turned my focus to the blacksmith shop door, but a thunderous bang signaling the lowering of the thick drawbridge from our barracks drew my attention. Our master-at-arms barked orders, then heavy footfalls rumbled across the open bridge. I wheeled, then watched as the swarm of defenders we'd spent so much gold summoning and training split their ranks, one headed for the western pass, the other filtering off toward the north. Although eager to engage with my troops and repel these pricks, I still needed my swords. And while I might have been able to spare Dicini, since I had more use for a tank in a party situation, I'd learned long ago that open field warfare was a different thing, and a Michonne with brutal intent sometimes made a better protector. Some defenders could provoke enemies into attacking, and that was well and good, but there were limits to the numbers they could distract. If we'd learned anything from fighting the crazies Kame sent our way, it was to let the enemy come, force them into a bottleneck at the mouths of the passes, push them back, then roll over them. Figures flooded around the curve in the western narrow and into view. Picking out a figure in green wielding a black bow, I winked my eyes in succession.
This unit is out of inspection range.
Come on! My feet longed to move, but I maintained an insatiable desire to gauge what we were up against before barking orders. I waited a few beats, then tried again.
Unknown archer, level 42.
Okay, if this guy was representative of the rest, the force boasted real combat experience, and we were going to need all hands.
Clan chat, Fowler Foundation Defense Channel, Gemini.
We're going to need all combatants but Dicini out here. Form ranks around Liatra and Charny. The enemy are in their 40s and are certain to bum rush the defenders than the healers. A flood of responses filled the HUD, showing we hadn't quite gotten the hang of protocol. Giles should have been the only one to respond. Luckily, the interface was adaptive and a single thought caused his response to flash green as the other lines blurred.
Giles.
We're inbound. Simple. To the point. While he might banter on endlessly about my failings, my chief advisor didn't waste words in the thick of the shit. I liked that about Giles. The western defender line clashed with the oncoming force. Screams echoed across the valley as cudgels, swords, and maces swung in vicious blows. Shields clattered, and I couldn't help but wish we'd upgraded the bucklers to kites. The chain-clad defenders pushed a front line of plate wearers back. I pumped a fist, then muttered under my breath, "Yeah, clobber them." A howl filled the air as a squad of the bare-chested warriors rounded the corner, then plowed into the fray. Weapons flew as my front line were crushed underfoot. Dark clouds formed overhead before bolts of lightning started picking off the second rank. As if disabling them wasn't good enough, the soldiers and warriors flooded together, then swung their weapons with intent. Heads busted. Alerts reporting defender deaths scrolled in a separate pane on my left. It was time to get busy. My team would arrive at the cave mouth to form the next line in moments, and I needed my swords. Halfway to the smithy, sharp hell exploded, then shot up one quad, and my knee buckled. I tumbled onto my chest. I coughed out the air in my lungs.
Unknown ranger fires long shot. Hit. Minus 134 HP.
My health bar emptied by almost a quarter, reminding me I was still level 24. Need those damned swords. The whizzing of arrows filled the air and dotted the ground around and beyond. Amelia retreated, firing as she went until she arrived beside me.
Come, we have to get you into the cave until Liatra can heal you.
Messages flooded my interface.
A defender has fallen in combat. 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 A defender—
Screw that. I bellowed. I reached back and ripped the arrow from my leg. A lightning strike of pain reminded me this wasn't Light of Babylon, and I howled. Blood spurted, then flowed to drench my studded leather leg guards. The elven woman was right. I needed a heal. Where's my bag? I have a few healing potions.
You can't fight on that leg.
I looked over both shoulders, then located my magic container on the ground 20 feet behind us. It must have slid off my shoulder when the arrow strike sucked up my attention. Explosions from the passes echoed into the valley.
A defender has fallen in combat. A defender has fallen in combat.
Amelia! I pointed at the bag. They're overrunning us! A massive figure exploded from the cave with a howl, then charged across the plateau. Brug, stop! Follow the plan! The warrior strode forward in long, leaping strides as if I hadn't spoken.
Come on, you slithering bunch of snakes. Meet the edge of my titan steel.
The calm in Amelia's voice infuriated me.
The bag is soulbound. It will return to you. Let's regroup in the cave, get you fixed up, then respond.
Then it struck me. Amelia was trying to get me out of the open. The elf I'd jokingly called my bodyguard for weeks, who never left me for more than my sleeping hours, and slept in the nook next to our own in the back of the cave, was living up to the foe title. I snatched up my bow, then she dragged me forward on my one good leg, looping my arm around her shoulder to take on my weight. Amelia, you should be fighting. I need my swords.
You are easily the most stubborn bastard with whom I've ever spent time, Gemini Fowler. You cannot fight like this. Your wound is gushing. Minus 31 HP, bleed. Minus 29 HP, bleed.
There are only 30 of them. We can...
How many alerts have reported enemy deaths, Shenhua? They're overrunning our defenses.
A giant spider clattered out of the cave in front of a giant wolf. The husky beastmaster who commanded them followed suit, but he stopped short when he spied Amelia dragging me along. He threw my other arm over his shoulder to help. Where the hell did you come from?
New Nin. Queen sent Brug and me when she heard about the attack.
What about the academy?
She sent everyone else there. It's in hand, unlike this place.
Oh, you noticed? Amelia dragged us to a halt, then leaned across me to speak to Yakol. The lines of her lips were as flat as her tone.
I've got him. The second line is broken. Go help Brug.
As if in reinforcement of Amelia's words, screams filled the air at the top of the steps behind us. Exploding shots rang out as more warnings filled my field of vision.
A defender has fallen in combat. A defender has fallen in combat. Brug has killed a level 42 archer. Your master-at-arms has died.
Damn it all.
A low figure appeared in the shadows of the cave as Amelia forced me past the smithy. Its hands waved in wide circles to frame a low body in azure light. Then a golden halo surrounded me.
Charney casts Flash Heal. Plus 27 HP.
While the heal took the edge off, it had done little to repair the damage. My muscles protested with every lurch forward as life drained away. He followed up with a slow heal and I received 7 hit points per tick. If I ever wanted our resident priest to be a competent healer, it would suit me to make him part of my hunting trips when I leveled my ranged classes so he could build his healing spell ranks at the same time. If only I'd thought of it sooner. Although he'd only mitigated a modicum of the damage, I managed to set a little more weight on my leg. I threw him a nod. Good job, shitbag.
Thanks, numbnuts.
An arrow zipped past him, and the goblin ducked. His head whipped around, then he eyed the missile lodged in the ground behind him.
That was close.
Get in the cave,
Amelia ordered. I didn't like the way she was ignoring me in the least. I wanted my swords. I wanted my bag. I wanted to suck down my healing potions. Then I wanted to slice and dice some invader ass. But she wanted me to rally in the cave. Charney didn't stick around to argue. I called after him. Thanks for the heal.
No problem, boss man. Liatra's on the way.
Amelia tugged me forward. I ripped my arm away. I'm good. I can fight. I reached for an arrow from my quiver, but my knee buckled again. She shook her head in violent swivels.
There are too many Gemini. Let the defenders buy us time. Giles has the queen on clan chat. Perhaps they'll send reinforcements.
I shook my head. You heard Yakol. They're at the academy. We've got to hold our own.
Brug has died. Brug will respawn in 120 seconds. Yakol has died. Yakol will respawn in 120 seconds.
Amelia pivoted, threw off my arm, dropped her bow down her shoulder, then snatched an arrow to its string. I fell hard on my ass but hardly noticed the pain. A man with close-cropped hair that formed little points on his forehead dashed towards us in bounding leaps. My forehead wrinkled at the sight of his garments. Strips of black cloth formed a loose-fitting robe-like top, but simpler matching pants belled around his ankles. He bore no weapons, but his fists glowed in a reddish halo. Amelia released her arrow. The figure stopped on a dime, twisting his upper body, then dipped his head out of the projectile's course. A hand swept up on a blurry arc, then stopped, the arrow held in his firm grasp. He dropped it, then lunged forward. Amelia fired again. He stopped, twisted, dodged, then snatched the second arrow in the same fashion. When Amelia fired a third shot, he dove into a long forward roll, popped back onto his feet, then delivered a devastating uppercut into my bodyguard's chin. A flash of red light exploded in the air, then Amelia shot off her feet and tumbled onto her back. The attacker clapped dirt from his hands.
Hold your fire, woman,
his low voice ordered as if she hadn't just thrown her bow 20 feet backwards.
Your cause is lost. Call off your people and we'll leave your burrow intact.
I struggled to rise on my bad leg. The man thrust out, then tapped me in the center of my forehead with one finger to send me back to my perch.
Don't make this more painful than it has to be.
Who the hell are you? He stepped forward, then cuffed me one across the nose. Amelia whipped a dagger from her belt. A soldier adorned in full silvery plate sped forward, sliding between the elf and her target. He whipped his sword around to leave the blade inches from Amelia's neck. Submit! The big dude grasped my bow, but I resisted just long enough to focus. Are you sure you wish to change your class from Ranger to Hunter? I selected yes. You are now a level 24 Hunter. Class abilities cooldown, 30 seconds. The plated warrior pressed the blade to Amelia's throat. We've been briefed. While you might not die, the king's right tells us the resurrection sickness is nasty business. Might be fine for teaching you a lesson. A trickle of blood dripped over the blade. Amelia Horn, -2 HP. To her credit, she didn't flinch. Instead, her gaze drifted to meet mine. She waited. The king's what?
His right,
the unarmed man in the strange outfit replied.
His right hand, chief advisor, Seema.
Amelia's gaze burned a hole in the side of my face, so I turned my head, then nodded. Her dagger rattled to the ground as bowmen, swordsmen, and shirtless warriors flooded the plateau.